This is Boomer Time, a proactive podcast for baby boomers, about baby boomers, and for people taking care of baby boomers. If that sounds like you, then you're in the right place. I'm Nancy Kogar, elder law attorney and aging advocate, and this podcast was made just for you. Remember, though, the things we discuss here are not intended to be legal advice, and no attorney-client relationship is established by this podcast. This episode is perfect for caregivers and individuals concerned about planning for possible future healthcare emergencies. This episode explores the importance of emergency and end-of-life healthcare directives, complications for you and your family if you don't have those directives, and why do you need these documents now versus later? Well, hello there. I want to start today by asking you some very serious questions that honestly will probably make you feel uncomfortable. But I also hope that they will get your attention, and more so, result in you taking some action to put emergency health care and end-of-life directives in place sooner than later. So with that in mind, let me ask you this. Who do you trust with your life? Who would you want making decisions for you in an emergency? And this may include life or death decisions. Are you related to these individuals? Do they live nearby? Do they know that you want them to make these decisions? Do they know what you want in these circumstances? What if they're not able to serve or something happens to them? Who would you choose as an alternate to make those decisions? And are they related to you? What will you do if you are seriously injured and or incapacitated or worse? Do you have legally enforceable documents in place that will communicate your wishes in such a circumstance and provide the authority specifically to that individual who you trust or individuals? Well, I told you that this might make you uncomfortable, but these are very real, heavy, and unfortunately common circumstances that I deal with as a lawyer. Like I said, I'm not trying to scare you, and I'm going to be talking about why you need specific healthcare documents in place for emergency, temporary, or even more long-term care decisions, and additional documents that you need in place that provide specific instructions for what you do want and don't want at the end of your life. So, according to the advocacy group, it's called the Conservation Project, which works to build awareness across the country for the importance of end-of-life planning. I say 90% of people out there say that it's important to talk with their loved ones about end-of-life care. But guess what? Only 27% have done it, and even less of them have anything in writing that would be enforceable. You know, I've heard it before. Oh, I told so-and-so what to do in such an emergency. They know what I want. Just let me die. Well, it's not that easy, and that's not going to work. So end-of-life issues are extremely controversial, and the issue of end-of-life care and directives, and even whether the right to die, is hotly contested. Those are hotly contested legal issues still today. And believe it or not, even terminally ill people have trouble with these decisions. Only about 50% of people diagnosed with a terminal illness have these directives in writing in their medical files. So absolutely know that the hospital ER, doctor's office, nursing home, or whoever may be treating you and overseeing your welfare during an emergency health situation is going to want proof, documented proof, and should, because having such authority in place protects you and it protects them, right? And think about this. You don't want the other individual that you don't trust stepping in and making those decisions for you, do you? I wouldn't. And I don't think you want that either. So this is why we're talking about this today. And I want to tackle this issue because too many folks don't take these actions. And then, I see it all the time, then they become incapacitated either through an accident, emergency, or illness. And guess what? It's too late at that point because you need capacity to make these documents. So today, more specifically, we're going to talk about what you need in place to authorize those people you trust, whether they be family or outside friends. Because trust me, I have people who say, I don't trust any of my family members. Whoever it is that you trust to make these type of decisions for you and why you need these documents and how you can have them act through these documents in such a circumstance. It's all about why you need very specific set of legal documents in place now before you become incapacitated or worse, and how to do that. So how is that for an introduction? Hello, folks. This is Nancy Kogar, and of course, this is Boomer Time, and I am so glad that you joined me. And as you know, this podcast is dedicated to talking about all issues related to aging. It's about baby boomers, for boomers, and for people caring for boomers. And as you know, I am a estate planning and elder law attorney here in Tennessee, and I have just seen too many people unprepared for the issues that come with aging. So that is why I created this podcast. I want to get these resources out to you. I want you to be aware of the importance of these issues, and that's what we're talking about today. So with that, welcome to Boomer Time. So we are talking about healthcare and end-of-life directives, which are both necessary under the law in Tennessee and in most states, quite frankly, to authorize someone to make what may be life-threatening decisions about your welfare and care when you can't do it yourself. These are critical. Everybody needs these. In fact, honestly, I don't think there are many issues that are more important than this one. Who's going to take care of you when you can't take care of yourself? That is just a bottom line question. So I hope I can help you work through that today. And we're going to talk more about how to do that after this break. Welcome back to Boomer Time. This is Nancy Kogar. What are these documents that we are talking about today? Well, they include durable healthcare powers of attorney, living wills, advanced and end-of-life directives, final directives, and even instructions as to the release and disposition of your remains, your body. And, you could also incorporate DNRs in here. Do not resuscitate. This is not easy stuff. I've seen people agonize over some of these decisions, and they are tough decisions. But I hope to dispel some misinformation today and hopefully motivate you out there to get this done before any such circumstances come up. If you don't, I'll be perfectly honest with you, you are setting yourself up for problems and putting your loved ones in a future crisis situation, because if and when they need to act on your behalf, it's likely that they won't be able to do that without having these documents in place. Or alternatively, racing to the court to file an emergency conservatorship to put such orders in place under the court's continued supervision. Don't do this to you, and don't do this to your family. I've been in those crisis circumstances, and the last thing you want on top of trying to figure out how to care for your loved one is this kind of situation. and not having the authority to make the decisions that you need to make, and that the facility or hospital is telling you that you need to go to court to get an order to allow you to do this. It happens, or in the alternative, without such enforceable directives, the hospital, or whatever it is, will do its best to keep you alive for as long as they can. If that's not what you want, then you need to take care of these documents. This is a very real issue, and it has resulted in some very complex legal battles, as you might imagine. We are going to talk about some of those and the larger legal debate that is still raging on about end of life and even right to die issues. No one wants to think about their own demise, but you should at least plan for it, because unless the rapture happens, we're all headed out of here the same way. Death and taxes, right? Now, I know that hospitals and doctors' offices have forms, generic forms available that they will ask you to sign as living wills or directives when you're in the office for a visit or even during surgery. But in my opinion, this is my opinion, you should not be relying on those documents. They are having you sign their documents because you don't have your own. And it's to protect them if there's a circumstance where you become unresponsive or worse. Think about that. So you want your own documents with your own instructions for that kind of circumstance. At least I think you do, right? So I wanted to talk about some real life examples of what could happen if you don't have these in place. And I am very confident that these will further support the why you need them. So probably the most familiar case involving this type of circumstance is the Terry Schiavo case, which was in Florida, and more specifically, St. Petersburg. You may be familiar with this one because it was all over the news for years. It started way back in February 1990 when she was just 26 years old. Healthy 26-year-old Terry Schiavo went into cardiac arrest at her home in St. Petersburg, and she was resuscitated, but at that point she had massive brain damage. The doctors diagnosed her as being in a persistent vegetative state. Her husband said that she had told him before that she didn't want to live like that if something like that happened. But that wasn't enough. Terry Schiavo did not have specific end-of-life documents in place that stated her wishes in such a circumstance. So, as a result, she was kept alive for years in a nursing home while her parents and her husband fought a long and very public legal battle about what should happen to her. Finally, in 2005, 15 years later, her feeding tube was removed and she died thereafter. She was 41 years old. I'm very familiar with this case because I was working as a television reporter there in Tampa, St. Petersburg in the area at the time. This was a grueling situation and it lingered for years, and it was very public. Not what you want. So I'm going to put a few references on the website. If you want to spend some more time looking at this case, it is very interesting, and it has fueled the Right to Die movement, which is still far from over, Dr. Kevorkian. So you may check those things out at nancykogar.com. Here's another real story. Jasmine is a 55-year-old woman who married late in life, and she finds her marriage on shaky ground. She has no children and estranged siblings that she doesn't talk with. She is closest in her life to a small group of coworkers at the office where she's worked for 20 years. Over the past few years, she's shared with those closest friends repeatedly that She were to have an accident, she would never want to be kept alive if she was very disabled and couldn't care for herself. Jasmine has high blood pressure, and it's poorly controlled. Then one day, she sustains a big bleed inside her brain, which requires emergency surgery. After surgery and a period of intensive care, her doctors say that if she survives and leaves the hospital, she will never likely be able to care for herself again. Jasmine didn't discuss her end-of-life preferences with her doctor or her estranged husband. She has no advanced directive. When she has the brain bleed, the doctors in the hospital explain her clinical situation and ask her husband what she would want. He says he doesn't know. He feels guilty about it and the fact that they had grown apart. Jasmine's friends tell her husband that she said she didn't want to be kept alive if she was so profoundly disabled. But her husband is just too overwhelmed to accept what they're saying. Instead, he instructs the doctors to do what is necessary to preserve Jasmine's life. So a feeding tube is placed in and transferred in a barely awake state to a nursing home for continued care. One more. Alice is an 84-year-old woman with oxygen-dependent emphysema from 60 years of cigarette smoking. She has 3 adult daughters who fight together constantly and are always on each other's throats. Alice develops pneumonia and is admitted to the hospital where she doesn't recover much in an ICU on a ventilator. Then her kidneys start to fail and her doctors move her into a life-sustaining action plan. Alice never discussed end-of-life issues with her doctors. Her pulmonologist gave her an end-of-life directive, but she never returned it. The ICU doctors talk with the family, more specifically the daughters, and recommend that Alice be transitioned to comfort care. If she survives, she will be permanently dependent on a ventilator to breathe. Well, her 3 daughters continue to bicker and can't come up with an agreement about her treatment. Alice lingers in ICU and dies 1 month later. So that was a circumstance where no one daughter or other was authorized to make any decisions in terms of Alice's care. They couldn't agree, and Alice just lingered on life support until she died. I think you get the picture. I hope so. We're going to take another quick break. When we come back, I'm going to talk about how you should get this done and how you should get it done right away. I'll be right back. Welcome back to Boomer Time, and Nancy Kogar here. I want you to stay tuned because I'm going to have some resources available for you at the end of the show and more information about how you can stay in touch with us. We've got some exciting things in the works, and I am really looking forward to telling you about that. Well, before we had our last break, I said I was going to talk to you about how you should get this done and how you should get it done sooner than later. Actually, I think I said right away. So you understand the why by now. At least I think you do. Here's the how. You need to call an estate planning attorney. Make sure it's an estate planning attorney. You could call me and ask about getting these documents completed. I can tell you what I do if you call me. I have very specific worksheets that I will have you complete so that you can think about these decisions. They're very important, and you can be very specific in your answers. I also think that's important. Like I said, we're dealing with life and death issues. So once you've made those decisions, then we can talk about that too. And then when we have you ready to sign those documents, they will be legally enforceable and available if and when you need them. So it's really that simple. I'm talking about these types of documents: a durable healthcare power of attorney, living will, advanced healthcare directives and end of life directives, funeral planning, which, I don't specifically do, but I include that in your estate plan if you have it. And I think that's important. And I do encourage people to think about it and plan for it. Final disposition of remains, and authorization for someone to have your body released. If you want a DNR or a do not resuscitate, that's a separate document, but we can talk about that too. So please just do it, okay? I hope that's the real takeaway here today. Just do it. These documents can be confusing, so I encourage you strongly to do it with the supervision of an estate planning attorney. You don't want to make mistakes with these decisions, right? So let's just go over these just to summarize. A durable healthcare power of attorney. That's really the first layer of defense. So if you are incapacitated, you are appointing 1, 2, or maybe even 3 people to serve in succession and make healthcare decisions for you that we will specify if and when you're not able to communicate that. And it's durable, which means if you become incapacitated, it won't lapse. Living will. My living will is a more general kind of authorization that if you're in a life or death type situation, your healthcare agent can have some discretion to make decisions for you if you're not able to communicate those. This is a separate document for me, aside from end of life directives. And here's the reason why I have it as a separate kind of general, limited discretion to your healthcare agent. Remember COVID? Well, more than once during COVID, I had ICU doctors calling me and family members on the other side who were arguing about whether to put their loved one on a respirator. So a respirator is one of those criteria in the end of life directive. So you can imagine, we didn't think that was going to come up, right? So the end of life directive is a statutory form, which means the legislature created that. I'm sure they didn't think that was going to come up either. But there was no provision for what would happen in that circumstance. So that's why I offer a living will, because I'm hoping that that will provide some flexibility and some discretion for some circumstance that we may not know about in the future. Or maybe there's some treatment that we don't know about right now. Of course, it has to be beneficial to the person that you're serving. But that's the kind of thinking that we're going through here. So this is why it's important for you to talk with someone that has experience in this area. And then there is the Advanced Healthcare Directive or End of Life Directive, which, as I've already mentioned, is very specific. So it says if you are at the end of your life, it gives you a scenario and says, is this considered for you a quality of life that you're willing to live with, essentially? And most people say no. And then it has another criteria where it says, if you have that condition, do you want this treatment? And that's where the respirator comes in. CPR is there. Liquid nutrition and hydration, those are there too. So as you can see from my examples earlier today, these are very real scenarios, and they're things that you need to prepare for. And finally, the final disposition of remains and authorization to have your body released. You think, why in the world would I need that? I've had that scenario come up where someone hasn't been able to get someone's body released. And the final disposition of remains. How do you want to be taken care of after you're you're gone. And what do you want to happen with your body? I've had people say everything from donating their entire body to science to donating it to one of these new kind of creative things where you can be buried with a tree, and everything to the traditional kind of burial. So there's a lot to think about, folks. And I enjoy helping people with these things. And that's why we're talking about this today. I want you to be aware. I want you to be educated. I want you to know that these things are important. So I just wanted to mention that we do have several things coming up that I'm really excited about for Boomer Time. Of course, there are more of you listening, and I just want to say thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing this. Thank you so much for listening. I am so glad you're here. And I hope you will continue to listen and share this with other people. I want this to be a really helpful, encouraging, and educating community. In that, we are going to be having video pretty soon. How about that? You get to see my smiling face. You get to see my buddy Nay, too. So we're going to have video coming up. We're going to transition to that on YouTube. You can still listen to the audio. You can still hear it wherever we have it available for you. But this is just going to be an extra feature. And I'm looking forward to that. Also, I have some upgrades to the website, nancykogar.com. And I really think these are going to be great, especially for those of you trying to get some help, get plugged in, be able to get some estate planning in the works. So these are pretty exciting. I've got my Elder Law News You Can Use newsletter. Told you about that before. You can go ahead and subscribe if you like. It's free, it's monthly, and it has really wonderful, relevant articles in it about aging and things that, you don't typically see on the news. So I would encourage you to subscribe to that. And you can do that by going to my website, nancykogar.com, and just saying, I want to subscribe. And please, as I said, just keep on listening to the podcast. I like being here. I'm making this time available because I care, and I want to get this information in your hands. And I also want you to be encouraged. So remember. So that's about it for me today. I was thinking maybe I'd go on. Just kidding. But I've enjoyed our time together. And like I said, this is heavy stuff, but important stuff. So I hope you'll give it some thought and you will take some action. All right. And I'll be right there with you. So I will see you next week. And thank you for listening to Boomer Time. Remember to tell me what you think. Bye-bye.